ready. Should be ready to go. Why am I in the wrong place again? Should be there. There we go. So, we're going to head to the theater room in a bit. The music sounds still a bit loud. There we go. I think that's better. So yeah, I did manage to get some viewing done this week. And we're going to talk about... I couldn't find since it was a bunch of single word titles, I had no idea how to incorporate that into the title for this stream, but I did what I could. So we got Eternals, Marvel's The Eternals, Antlers, and Animaniacs Season 2. So let's dig right into it. Let's head on over to the theater room. Where am I not here? I'm not here. Hold on. You're right there. There I am. Squeeze in here. A little bit smaller. A little bit smaller. There we go. That's better. Okay, so let's get on with the first movie, and that is Marvel's Eternals. Let's see, where is it in highest growth? I heard it was, as much as people were decrying it as the worst Marvel movie since Thor: The Dark World, ooh, it actually managed to rake in a good chunk of change. Opening weekend for it was $71 million, just domestically. And worldwide is opening week, so far it has grossed over $161 million. And the budget, so opening weekend, it's basically made back its budget. I'm not seeing any list for the budget on it. Let's try Wikipedia for that. Because Box Office Mojo doesn't have... There we go. 200 million. So opening weekend, it's just about made back its budget of $200 million. So, I mean, yeah. It's not like a runaway success, but it's already on track to at least start breaking even. And all I gotta say is, if you think this is worse than Thor: The Dark World, then that's your problem. Because, personally, I would put this more in line with Doctor Strange. It, for one thing, I think Chloe Zhao, I think it's probably... She probably brings the most of her style to her Marvel movie, whereas so many other Marvel directors, like even Scott Derrick, you got guys with varying styles to their films, like Kenneth Branagh, Scott Derrickson, and James Gunn. And even though Gunn can get a little bit of his style in there, I feel like Eternals has the most of its director's style in the movie. And Zhao is a very distant sort of hands-off style of, distancing yourself from the characters and showcasing great, sweeping vistas and, the landscape and whatnot. Zhao is a very interesting, she's a very artsy director. Just based on this and, crap, what was it called? The one she won the Oscar for, Nomadland. And not to mention the fact that she's basically digging... In true MCU fashion, they're digging through the annals of Marvel history, bringing out C, D, and F listers, like the Guardians of the Galaxy and Iron Man. Like, that's the thing. Before 2008, nobody really knew or cared about Iron Man. He was he wasn't the face of the Marvel universe like he was since 2000, since the Robert Downey Jr. played him. He's mainly just been a C-lister. I mean, before the MCU kicked off, most of what people knew about Marvel was Spider-Man and Wolverine, and to an extent, Deadpool and Venom. And the MCU really took the more, these wider swathes of the Marvel comics and brought them to the forefront so that anybody could stand a chance of being somebody that the non-comic reading public would know. And so here we are with Jack Kirby's The Eternals, which was when he was on a deep, that's the thing, is there was a point in time in the comics where Kirby was deep into Joseph Campbell's, he read what was it called? Joseph Campbell's Charity of the Gods was apparently what the book was called. And it was Kirby being deep into this sort of shared mythology where so many cultures have the god of the same god, gods of the same elements of the world and society and whatnot. And so he was off on bringing Thor into the Marvel universe, and then he went over to DC and created the new gods, and then he came back to Marvel and created the Eternals, and it's just he was deep into a mythology kick. He was that dork in high school who brought their own copy of that Greek mythology book that they, not the one that they used in class, but one that they owned personally, But the Eternals. The only really big thing about the Eternals that people outside of the big fan, deep cut fans would know is that Thanos was an Eternal. And I'm assuming if the Eternals stays a property in the MCU, they're going to dig more into that. They already make a reference to a character who is Thanos' actual brother in the comics. But I'll save that for the spoiler talk. But what they do here is basically Corey over at Double Toasted kind of pointed this out. This is essentially Marvel's Book of Genesis. This is the very beginnings of Earth in the Marvel Universe. And so you've got characters like Gilgamesh, who are literally named after characters from history. And then you've got characters with the same name but spelled differently, like Icarus, who is essentially Superman in this movie, as well as Sprite, who kind of plays off like Peter Pan, and what was another name that was Athena, who served as the inspiration for Athena in Greek mythology. And so you've got these aliens who serve as the inspiration for gods to the early human society, from the Babylonians to the ancient Greeks to all sorts of people, and then all throughout history. And so eventually they reach a point where their job is done and they're just waiting for what is revealed to be their true purpose to start taking effect. In the meantime, they are immortal beings who just kind of live amongst the humans, waiting for this final task to be done before they can return home. Only turns out the twist is they can't return home, and I won't dig into that. I won't really dig into that. It's a major plot twist in the movie, but yeah, I mean, things aren't exactly what they seem, and that part is revealed in the second half of the movie. But I put this on the same lines as Doctor Strange, because not only are they the less of superhero terms of visuals, it's less superhero-y in terms of theming. Both deal with the mystical, and in this case the cosmic, and they aren't your typical, tights and fights sort of essentially wrestling with superpowers. And I mean, those elements do pop in, but they're not. The bigger thing about this is dealing with these characters and their true mission as they learn about it on this planet. And I will say that Zhao brought her visual eye to this film, and it is one of the most gorgeous looking in the MCU. Like, I'm gonna have to, like, before Spider-Man comes out next month, I'm gonna have to dig through the entire MCU film series and try to figure out and try to finalize my list, my rankings again. And I honestly can't think of a better looking. It's a bit muted, whereas some of the other the MCU movies tend to be more vibrant, like a comic book. But it's also, like, beautifully done cinematography, just absolutely gorgeous, and makes great use of on-location shooting, which Zhao proposed to do, and which makes sense. Like, imagine if this was going the route of, like, the MCU movies where they try to basically do the George Lucas thing of everything's on a green screen set, and it's like, no, the location shooting is gorgeous, and it makes the film better. On location is great. But, yeah. It's, not to mention the fact that, as much as people may think that this cast is token, almost like, oh, it's like Captain Planet and all these shows in the 90s, and we got a little something for everybody. I think it works more in the sense that it's representative of a collective, so it's not just like this person represents us, you're not tacking certain, it's not like a checklist of like, we got this person for this thing and that. But I mean, it's more like it's representative of like the fact that because they're the inspiration for a lot of world cultures, they represent more of the world in terms of their ethnicity and racial background and their gender identity and all that sort of thing. And so you've got these characters that are supposed to basically represent humanity as a whole, and that's why it's diverse. I mean, you've got you still have a majority of white characters. Three of the characters are white, and then you've got 2 Asian, 1 Eastern Asian, 1 Southern Asian. Well, no, you got 2 Eastern Asian, 1 Southern Asian, a black man, and a Hispanic woman. So I mean, you've got a wide swath of of cultural makeup within this group, and I think that, but at the same point, it's like still somewhat representative of, at least in America, the sort of cultural makeup of people, and that's why it never bothered me, because it's like, number one, it doesn't matter that they're a diverse cast of varying background and whatnot. It's not like a token list or anything, or even if it was, it didn't detract from the movie because the cast is really good. Gemma Chan really does well leading the... Oh, that's the other one, Cersei. That's another Greek mythology figure that gets named from this group. But Cersei's great. Angelina Jolie does well, but she kind of... But, like, that's the thing is... Zhao's acting direction is very cold and distant. And that's kind of my issue. That was kind of my issue with Nomadland, is that everything kind of felt lifeless in terms of the acting. Like, the acting didn't feel... Like, Zhao doesn't seem to be an actor's director. She seems to be more of the sort of overall visual style of director. She's not big on directing performances as much as she is directing visuals and camera movements and things like that. That's where she really shines. And even the action set pieces in here she does really well at. I'd be interested to see her do like an actual action movie and see if she could do that. But overall, yeah, the performance here aren't killer. And you've still got some of your usual Marvel style of like one-liners and whatnot and jokes, and so like Sprite creates illusions, and so she at one point puts Gilgamesh in a giant onesie, like a baby, and then there's the bit from the trailer where Icarus smashes what's his name? Brian Tyree Henry's character, Faustus. Once again, Faust. Another character from cultural history. And maybe partially inspiration for Hephaestus, because it seems there because technology and whatnot. But yeah, the scene where Icarus smashes Faustus's desk, and he thinks it's vibranium, and he's like, summer collection, IKEA. And so yeah, it's definitely it definitely kind of utilizes that pithy one-liner style of humor that the MCU and Marvel in general is kind of known for. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but overall, the acting is probably the biggest hurdle for people. Is going to be the biggest hurdle for people, because you're not going to get the kind of acting you usually see in Marvel films from this. But I still enjoyed this heavily. Like, even though I was not familiar with the Eternals or even the revealed characters that came towards the end, when they finally revealed who Kit Harington plays, Kit Harington, who is introduced as Dane Whitman, and unless you were a deep-cut Marvel reader, you wouldn't know that name off the top of your head, but they revealed who he is. And Kit Harington is essentially Gemma Chan's boyfriend. He's the Lois Lane to her Superman. The human character who falls in love with the immortal being. And they're cute. They're a cute little couple. I like them. We didn't spend a whole lot of time with them, but they are cute, and I'm very interested to see them in the future if Disney keeps them around. I know Kit Harington has like a 5-picture deal, and so does somebody else who comes in the spoilery bits. But yeah, overall, this is not bad. I mean, it's a standard Marvel plot of the hero of like essentially an Avengers style movie where the heroes have to save the world, and then they throw in the bits of like learning the truth of their mission from the whole period, and then the character dynamics, like the fact that Druig is much more interest. It's because he's a mind controller. He wants to interfere more and stop humans from making so many mistakes before he realizes he can't. Not only because he's not powerful enough, but because that would just defeat the purpose of being there. And he kind of has to wrestle with that. Although he doesn't, once again, because of the acting is so subdued, you never really feel him wrestle with these sorts of problems. But yeah, like Gilgamesh and Athena have a relationship where she begins to essentially have kind of dementia, but basically, or Alzheimer's, some form of memory loss where she or at least if nothing else, like a fugue state where she goes into a kill mode and just attacks anything close to her. And Gilgamesh is there as her lover, but as also somebody, her caretaker, somebody there to help her when she starts to go into these states, until she finally tackles it and is able to deal with it herself. And I especially liked Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo. He's essentially Kumail Nanjiani, but with muscles and can shoot lasers. But Kingo and Kingo's valet, played by Harish Patel. I forget his name. Karan. They were great comedic. They were a great comedic addition to the movie, and I kind of like Karen there, because that's the thing, is like throughout the movie, when the Eternals finally reveal themselves to be immortal beings from space, like Kit Harington and Karen are just like, oh yeah, that's nothing. Most of us got snapped back into existence after 5 years from the Avengers fighting aliens. Like, this is nothing. Like, welcome to the party. Apparently, they've just been aliens the whole time now. Also the introduction of Kingo as a Bollywood star was great. It was a great little Bollywood tribute. But yeah, like the characters having these conflicting politics and conflicting viewpoints of their mission. It's interesting. It's very interesting, though not the best executed. Personally speaking, there are two plots. There are two plots going on at the same time. There's one involving a deviant who are in the comics are basically more like just basically the Eternals, but dark. They're basically like the demons to the Eternals, gods and angels. And here they're more like just monsters that they have to be destroyed. And one of them starts stealing the powers of the other Eternals and gaining sentience and becoming more like them. And I feel like there's that plot, and then there's the emergence of a celestial from the planet's core. And if it fully emerges, it will completely destroy the Earth and kill everything on the planet. And so you have those two conflicts on top of the Eternals having their inter relationship sort of team conflict. And I feel like focusing on the Deviant first or the Celestial first would have been better, instead of trying to have both conflicts and the team conflict at the same time. Like, I feel like they should have started with the Celestials emerging, and that brings back the Deviants, or the Thanos snap brought back the reverse snap in the Endgame brought back the Deviants. And we have to take one, and one of them is stealing our powers, and we have to take them out. And then it's revealed that a Celestial is beginning to emerge. I feel like one or the other would have worked fine, but by trying to do both, you ended up with just way too much. Because this is 2.5 hours, and I feel like there's way too much for that. But from here on, we're gonna get into spoilers, and there's some this is where we get into the spoilers of the post credit scenes. There are two of them, and as I mentioned, the first one deals with Thanos' actual brother from the comics, Eros, who goes by the name Star Fox of all things. How Marvel and Nintendo can both have Star Fox. I think it's because the F is capitalized in Nintendo's for trademark purposes. But yeah, and he's played by Harry Styles. And Harry Styles also got a 5-picture deal, supposedly. So Kit Harington and Harry Styles are supposed to be staying around, contractually speaking, unless they decide to nix the contract. But they introduced Pip, who is a troll character, like literal troll, like a literal CGI troll, played by Patton Oswalt, which is fun. Patton Oswalt got to finally be in the MCU proper after being stuck in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and never seen the light of day in the MCU proper. But yeah, he plays Pip, and he's great for the little chunk of time that he's there. And then Harry Styles is actually fairly solid. I mean, you get a heartthrob like Harry Styles to play the god of love, essentially. I mean, that makes sense. But he's also a decent enough actor that he can play off this sort of, dashing, heroic type. And, yeah, I'm interested to see what they do with him in the next film, because they tease him. Basically what happens in this film is that they prevent the Celestial from emerging. After the team splits off, and Icarus is revealed to be the final boss, who they have to fight together and hold off in order to stop the Celestial from emerging. But along with Icarus, Sprite has teamed up with Icarus because she was in love with him the whole time. But we don't know that until the team dynamics start messing up, because it's never really revealed or hinted at all that much. I'd have to rewatch the movie to see if it was ever really there, because it feels like it comes right the hell out of nowhere. But yeah, Icarus and Sprite just want to keep wants to help the Celestial emerge and fulfill their job on Earth, and the rest want to protect the Earth and save it. And after they stop the Celestial, Icarus flies off into the sun and presumably dies. And Sprite is turned human thanks to Cersei having just enough power left over in order to turn her human so that she can finally age, which is what she's been wanting the whole time. Being stuck as a pubescent, prepubescent girl has been murder on her. And then at the end, the Amisham, the Celestial who sent them to Earth, steals Kingo, Cersei, and Faustus, who are the last surviving Eternals on Earth, after Athena, Druig, and the speedster Makari all go off into space to find the other Eternals and free them from the cycle of death and rebirth that the Celestials have created for themselves. But yeah, that's the other thing too. Is Makari is played by a deaf actress and actually speaks using American Sign Language, which was a nice addition. So yeah, Cersei, Faustus, and Kingo are taken by Arishem, and Athena, Makari, and Druig are met by Eros and Pip, and Eros reveals, "I know how to find your friends." So that's gonna presumably be the plot line of the next Eternals movie, is Eros leading Athena, Druig, and Makari to rescue Cersei, Kingo, and Faustus. But on top of that, at the final credit scene, Dane Whitman, who's been teased at and having, that little bits and pieces of comics lore, reveals to have the Ebony Blade, which in Marvel Comics and presumably in mythology, I don't know what's real and what's not. They mention Excalibur, but I don't know if the Ebony Blade is a Marvel thing or a mythology thing. But it's the token weapon for the character known as the Black Knight. And the Black Knight is essentially just a guy who wears medieval armor and has a magical blade he's a mystic hero, and he's helped out the Avengers on certain fights, and one of which was Kang the Conqueror, who is already teased at as one of the big bads for this phase. So Kit Harington is about to be playing the Black Knight, so he's about to don some Game of Thrones armor again, and wield a blade that is essentially the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, except that it's also bloodthirsty. So it's kind of like the sword from it's kind of like Soul Edge, I think is the name of it. The Soul Calibur sword. It's kind of like that a bit, and Nightmare. If you kill people rampantly and commit evil acts with the blade, it turns bloodthirsty. And also, you're basically a hemophiliac, and you are profuse to bleeding. You're more profuse to bleeding out when you wield the blade. So it's got some downsides, but it does make you immune to all magical attacks and can cut through anything. So there's that. And so when it's revealed that Kit Harington's Dane Whitman is pulling out the Ebony Blade, there's a voice off screen that says, "Are you sure about that?" And it's a deep voice, and people were saying, "Oh, is that Samuel Jackson? Is that Nick Fury inviting him to the Avengers Initiative?" I assumed it was his uncle, maybe, but Chloe Zhao has revealed that the voice off screen asking him about the Blade was in fact Marshala Ali as Blade. So first appearance of Blade in the Marvel Universe is talking to the Black Knight about the Ebony Blade. Which is the weird thing, because the Black Knight and Blade have had no interaction in the comics before this. This is entirely new territory. And I'm very interested to see where this leads, if anywhere. So that's interesting. Got some interesting stuff coming in. And then, well, that's it with the spoiler talk. But, so, yeah, ultimately, I think that Eternals has some problems. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect Marvel movie by any means. Very few of them are, actually. But I enjoyed myself. I highly enjoyed myself way more than I was expecting to, given the initial backlash to the film. And I don't know where any of that came from. I don't know what the hell all that was about, but suffice to say that, you know, the best way to determine if you're going to like a movie or not is to just see it yourself. And yeah, Eternals I enjoyed for the most part, even if, you know, it's not going to be my top 10 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Maybe. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But I definitely enjoyed myself with this. It's going to be an honorable mention this year, and then Shang-Chi is going to actually be on the list for my favorite movies, because I think Shang-Chi was a bit better at handling its story than this was. But overall, I'm glad. I'm liking so far what Phase 4 is doing. So next up, we got to deal with Hawkeye and Spidermans. So we'll see how that goes. As for next on this review, we've got a little horror movie produced by Guillermo del Toro called Antlers. And this was delayed by the pandemic, and it's finally got a release in theaters for Halloween weekend. And I heard about it. I knew it was about a Wendigo. I was very curious about it. And what we got here is actually a story about dealing with trauma brought on by abusive families. While the monster is a Wendigo, which brings up issues of co-opting and appropriating indigenous mythology and monsters to tell your stories centering on white people, which has been, you know, which gave me kind of like the Curse of La Llorona vibes, if you remember that. That really bad one with Linda Cardellini as the protagonist, but it deals with the character from Mexican and Hispanic mythology. Yeah, it kind of gave me those kind of vibes, but unlike that movie, this movie has way more going for it. Like, this isn't just jump scares after another. This is a movie dealing with trauma. And specifically dealing with the trauma of having an addict for a parent. The main character, the kid character, his dad was a meth dealer and manufacturer who starts becoming a Wendigo. And so it is up to the kid in order to satiate both his brother and his father's hungers as they start turning into these monstrosities. And it's about dealing. So you have this kid who was forced to take care of his father, who has this addiction, and so you have this sort of satiating the beast sort of thing, where his transformation becomes sort of an allegory for addiction, and, you know, specifically a narcotic addiction, and it's very interesting in that regard. Not to mention the fact that this is a tragedy of just the state of small-town America, how everything looks busted and run down, and, you know, there's the whole, you know, people are dealing with opioid and meth addiction because that's part of the things you have to do when there's, like, nothing else, when there's that much depression and terribleness going on around you. And so then you have there's like a shot where there's an ice cream shop next to a drug rehab clinic. And yeah, it's really really bad. And of course, then the kid who also has these warning signs of some kind of trauma, some kind of issues going on, and you know that things aren't right at home. And meanwhile, Kerry Russell and why can't I remember his name? He is so good. He is this time he's not a racist piece of garbage. Jesse Plemons. Jesse? Yeah, Jesse Plemons, who is actually the same age as I am. Huh. Anyway, Jesse Plemons and Kerry Russell are a brother and sister, and they both had they hint at an abusive father without revealing exactly what went down. But Russell ran away and left behind her brother, and so she takes on all of this guilt from not only from what happened to her, but from leaving him behind. And he's just like, look, no, it's fine, you know. Then it's like trying to let her know that, you know, he's glad that she's back and that, you know, yeah, this was an awful thing, but we don't know, you know, but he's rather, you know, he's just worried about her being okay. And, you know, they're siblings, you know, they went through this trauma together, and that's all, you know, what matters is that they are together and, you know, family still. And then once this kid's problem starts showing, you know, once she learns about this kid and his dad, she wants to kind of help him escape that trauma. And Plemons is like, look, you know, saving him isn't gonna solve anything. You know, it's not gonna fix the trauma you dealt with, and you know and he also calls her out on the fact that she wields this trauma as like this massive shield against, you know, accepting the fact, you know, that she doesn't necessarily need to take care of this kid, and he thinks she's doing it as like penance or even like as you know, sort of like, you know, doing what nobody else did for them, you know, trying to, you know, thinking like, look, you weren't the only one who went through that trauma. You went through trauma with Dad, and so did I. And he calls her out on the fact that she's kind of selfishly focusing on the fact that she suffered trauma from their dad, but not him, you know, not acknowledging that he did as well. It's all very interesting. It's not, once again, it's not like the most deft at it. I mean, we're still dealing with a horror movie. It's not like a real hard-hitting drama or anything like that. But I mean, for what it is, it's handling things fairly deftly. And then then the monster bit becomes becomes the forefront of what's going on, and the kills are, my God, like the kills are some of the goriest, nastiest kills I've seen in a horror movie in a long time. And they really are a great mix of both both practical and CG effects. It's really excellent. Cinematography is also really good here, which you don't see in a lot of horror movies. There's great sweeping shots, there's great panning, there's great use of camera movement. It's good looking stuff. Like, there's only really one bad moment where it cuts from pure darkness to this like blinding almost gray light, and it like blinds you initially when it makes that, like, if they had faded into the light, it would have been fine. The quick cut from pure darkness to bright light just murders your eyes. But yeah, overall, like the allegories for addiction and withdrawal and the themes of abuse and trauma are all elevate this higher than your normal horror movie. and it's not as good as say Hereditary or Midsummer. I think Ari Aster is much better at handling the kind of those kind of topics as a writer, but it's still. But here, it's still better than I honestly enjoyed this more than Halloween Kills, and the only thing that I thought was better than this in terms of horror this year was A Quiet Place Part 2. But yeah, the only other critique I would have on Antlers is how the only despite the fact that they're using what is Wendigo? What tribe specifically, or is it more than one? Algonquin. So Algonquin sort of mythology is co-opted for the monster, and then there's only one indigenous actor featured prominently in the movie, and it's Graham Greene, who has been a long-standing indigenous actor in Hollywood. He goes all the way back to Dances with Wolves. He was in Wind River and Winter's... Wait, which one was Winter's Tale? Oh god, that was that really bad movie with... not that one. Apparently he was even in The Green Mile. But yeah, he's a Oneida, I wanna say it's pronounced, which is one of the 5 nations of the Iroquois, and so I don't know. I don't know much about indigenous American like breakdowns, like Iroquois versus Algonquin, and the differentiations between the various tribes and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, they got Graham Greene, who is a long-standing indigenous actor in Hollywood, and is one of the best actors of that age. And he unfortunately is completely wasted in a role that is just him saying, "Oh yes, the Wendigo is a thing that we believe is a thing. Yes, this is not just a fairy tale to us. This is a real thing, and it is indigenous in nature." And then he's never seen again in the rest of the movie. And it's like, wow. And that's the thing, is they introduced him as the town's previous sheriff. So there could have been way more going on with that character in the movie than they had. And then they didn't do anything with him. And it's like, you brought Graham Greene on to just basically say, oh yes, the Wendigo. He is very, very real to my people. Which is what brought up my concerns of like Iroquois versus Algonquin. Like, it would basically be like, I don't know how much of that is like having a Cuban come up and talk about these are the things for my people, and he's talking about like Colombian, something that's from Colombian culture. I don't know if that's I don't know how weird that is or not, because I'm not as well versed in indigenous cultures as I ought to be. But yeah, like I said, ultimately, that's like one check mark against it. That's like, that could have been handled better. But yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you got people who just like the idea of the monster and not thinking about the culture surrounding it. It's not as egregious as The Curse of La Llorona, I'll say, but it definitely is like a mark against the movie, because it's like, look, come on, you couldn't give Graham Greene more to do. Like, maybe he's the retired sheriff, so he's there. Why isn't he there helping out this guy who maybe he's a new, like Jesse Plemons, maybe he's the new sheriff, and he just got promoted to sheriff, or he elected to sheriff, and he has not prepared for this sort of thing, and so Graham Greene is there to help him out, not only with the mystical, like, monster stuff, indigenous monster stuff, but for dealing with these issues as a cop. I don't know. That's all I'm saying. It's like, why isn't there more to this? Also, the deaths are stupid, but that's par for the course for horror movies. It's nowhere near as egregiously stupid as Halloween Kills. So, yeah, it's... Antlers has some issues. I'm not going to deny that. But it is a very solid horror movie. Great gore, great kills, and even some tackles some very hard-hitting issues in America. So I definitely recommend checking it out. The last review I wanted to cover was the latest season of Animaniacs. And they're saying it to the max. I don't know what voice I was doing there. Yeah, new season of Animaniacs dropped, and it is same as the first season. It's more of the same of the first season. So if you liked that, you're gonna like this. And I feel like a bit of it wasn't as memorable, but there was a lot of really good bits going through this. There's one segment that was just a bunch of rejected pilots for new Animaniacs characters, and that was fun. They do a whole Duck Amuck tribute where Yakko fights a digital animator. And, there's a whole bunch of references to countries of the world. They really get into the fact that Yakko is famous for countries of the world. And how kind of, like, mimetic that has become. But, yeah, overall, I think this is once again, the new Animaniacs. I kind of wish they would bring back more of the old characters, as well as having some of these newer ones. I think that would be fun, because, I mean, they reuse some of the newer characters, like the gnome, the angry gnome who lives in people's mouths, and acts and says the angry things that the host wants to say, but isn't angry enough to say it out loud. There's that weird one with like the little girl talking, and it's an actual like toddler or like little kid talking nonsense onto a microphone. And then they've animated like this tiny little alien that's trying to get back to its spaceship. That character's back. But I feel like having like a Buttons and Mindy, or especially I would love Slappy the Squirrel to make a comeback. But I don't know what the legal reasonings behind them not recurring are. I think I don't know if it's like a union actor thing, or if it's like they only had the rights to Wacko Yakko and Dot and Piggy and the Brain. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I would love for a new Slappy segment at some point. That'd just be the best. It also plays around with the art styles, so there's the standard style that for the new season, for the new series, and then they play around with more like, once again, the anime, like they do a Thundercats opening. It's just called 80s Cats. And they play around with that style. Then they have styles that are much more like during the Duck Amuck tribute, he turns into a Van Gogh style painting. And the rejected pilots all have varying styles. One of the rejected pilots uses the Buzz on Maggie style from that Disney cartoon, and I want to know who on the animation team remembered the Buzz on Maggie enough to include that as a tribute. Who included that reference into this show? Because it came right the hell out of nowhere. Also, there's a bunch of jabs at Nicolas Maduro. And I guess that's the closest to... Because the old Animaniacs have done things like that, where they poked fun at Saddam Hussein and various other world leaders. And they also include, jabs at Putin and Kim Jong-un and whatnot. And, of course, jabs at Trump, because this was produced during the tail end of Trump's presidency. But it feels weird to single out Maduro. And I'm wondering, because it happened, he shows up multiple times to be the butt of jokes, mainly in the Pinky and the Brain stuff, but why focus on Maduro specifically? Is it because that's the closest we have to a Saddam Hussein in the media, or I don't know. It felt weird to single out Maduro of all people, but that's all. That was just a weird thing I noticed. Also, there is a segment that is just a song about Columbus, But instead of the traditional, like, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, da-da-da-da-da-da, it's more like, oh, wait, no, Columbus, didn't discover America because he didn't actually land on the continental United States. He only landed in the Bahamas and Cuba, and he thought that was India. And he was also a horrible genocidal slave, slaver, and an absolute piece of garbage, And so the song is more about like, oh wow, Christopher Columbus is a piece of shit. Why does he have his own holiday? Did not expect that turn from Animaniacs, but I highly welcome it. Seriously, Chef Boyardee has done more for Italian Americans than Christopher Columbus ever did. Fuck Christopher Columbus. Make it Chef Boyardee Day. Fuck. Be more respectful to Italians than having a genocidal slaver who was even hated at during his own time, who was so monstrous that people at his own time were like, dude, what the hell? Yeah. So the new season of Animaniacs is, as season 2 is on par with season 1. I think they had more going on in the original series run, but they're still kind of, but I'm still giving them a chance to like get their footing and get used to the new era of writing and creating the show, trying to make the show work in a modern setting, and it's working fairly well. It is working about as well as you would think Animaniacs would as a reboot, and I'm very curious to see how season 3 will go. But yeah, Animaniacs, I'm glad it's back, and I'm having fun with it. The last thing I want to talk about is something I've been wrestling with for a while now. And that is what to do about Netflix. So as many of you know, Netflix has recently come into hot water over the Chappelle's last comedy special, where he spent basically the last half of it going off on a transphobic rant, punching down at trans people and the trans community, and then asking, "What does punching down mean?" Motherfucker, George Carlin pointing out what punching down was back when Andrew Dice Clay was popular. Don't act like you don't know what punching down is, you piece of shit. But yeah, so in the wake of that, there was a lot of issues raised by the trans employees of Netflix that eventually led to a walkout last month. And I haven't really focused or watched any content on Netflix since that walkout was announced. And initially, this segment was just going to be called "Why I'm Not Covering Netflix Properties." But the more I thought about it, the more it's more like why I'm debating about covering Netflix properties or not. Because that's the thing, is like, I still pay for Netflix. I am the base user for my family's Netflix account. So everybody has user profiles on my account that I pay for. So even if I'm not watching, I'm still paying for Netflix. And my family is still using Netflix. But we're not just talking about the recent issues with Dave Chappelle. This has been an ongoing thing with Netflix for the last several years. We're talking the mistreatment of creators all around. Because, I mean, there are stories that you can read about how creators were paid for their content to be shown on Netflix and then had to fight to receive a single dime from Netflix. Netflix kind of like, hey, we'll pay you to show your content. Okay, where's my money? What? Well, we can't hear you. We think you're breaking up. I'm sorry, we're going through a tunnel. Get back to me later. Then, of course, there's the mistreatment of the employees, not just the most recent one with trans employees, but just there's been a long-standing anecdotal history about non cis het white people having issues working at Netflix corporate. And it sounds like it's a lot of the same issues that you find at Activision Blizzard and the like. And just, it seems like a lot of these content companies, these entertainment companies, have similar problems in their work environments, where it's a lot of cishet white dudes in charge, building this atmosphere that is very very harmful, and that's ultimately harmful, if not outright harmful, to non-white, non-cis, non-heterosexual people working there. And then on top of those issues about people who are working for Netflix that are dealing with their problems that they're dealing with from Netflix corporate stiffing the bill on the content creators that they're profiting off of. There's also the fact that there's just absolutely no quality control at Netflix. There hasn't been for years now. Netflix will pump out 365 Days and the Chappelle specials, and then go off and produce Kid Cosmic or Squid Game, or showcase Squid Game. They'll have these amazing, absolutely phenomenal films and series, and then in the same breath, and then on the same site, they'll be showcased along Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop show. Things that are just absolutely reprehensible to be shown to the public. That anybody with any level of quality control would be like, we don't want this on our platform. We have standards. Netflix has no standards. And then when the Dave Chappelle thing dropped, instead of standing by their employees, Netflix's defense was freedom of speech. Hey man, it's freedom of speech. You don't have to like it, but it's that free speech argument. But that's the thing. That didn't have to be their argument. Their argument for the Chappelle special is like, look, we had the deal with Chappelle. We are obligated to showcase his final special. We don't have to agree with him, but we are obligated to show his special because that was the deal we made with him. They could have been like that. Like, look, we don't approve of his thing, and we are under, this was only under obligation to Chappelle for the deal that we made with him. And then and then promote more of their trans properties and trans creators on top of that. But instead it was more like, why are you all getting mad at us? It's freedom of speech, man. Freedom of speech, man. As though that misses the point, is that no government is coming in and arresting Netflix CEOs and Dave Chappelle. That's what the freedom of speech is. Freedom of speech means the government cannot arrest you for speaking out. It does not mean that when you can say anything. It does not mean that if you say something, there will not be repercussions for what you said. So the fact that they were so easily willing to throw their trans employees under the bus when it came to defending Dave Chappelle, of all people, who really hasn't been funny since he stopped working on the Chappelle show. And it makes me wonder, how funny was Dave Chappelle ultimately, and how much of it was he had a good writing staff that worked on that show? That's what I wonder, because Chappelle has really settled into the idea that I'm funny no matter what, and if you aren't laughing, you're the problem. Whereas good comedians recognize that if people aren't laughing, you're doing the joke bad. You aren't doing a good joke. Like Dan Aykroyd finally came out and said, cancel culture's not a thing. Comedies tastes change. Like, he was friends with James Brown and would do James Brown impressions. He's not interested in doing them anymore, even though they were friends and it used to not be a big issue. Now he recognizes, oh wait, me doing the James Brown impression probably won't work as well with audiences. They don't know that I was friends with James Brown and that was a thing. So I don't do those jokes anymore. George Carlin's jokes evolved over time, so even if he had bad, tasteless jokes that weren't funny after a while, he didn't do those jokes again because he recognized that the comedy changes. Comedy changes. And if you don't change, it's not the audience's fault if they don't think you're funny anymore. Comedy is never evergreen. Comedy changes. Comedy changes faster than bacteria. Comedy evolves and changes faster than bacteria and viruses do. So you gotta keep up with comedy and keep up with what people find funny, or else you're gonna be stuck stuck with Jerry Seinfeld and Dave Chappelle crying about cancel culture, and ultimately turn into reactionary losers who can't take the fact that comedy has moved beyond them. Good comedians can adapt to changing tastes in comedy. Bad comedians whine about how nobody will laugh at their jokes, and then become Steven. And then you got folks like Steven Crowder who were never funny to begin with, and when they can hack it in comedy, they just became a reactionary grifter. So yeah, I think what hits the nail on the head more than anything else is this quote from Stellan Skarsgård. He was at the 2020 Göteborg Film Festival in Sweden. And they were asking him about, like, Marvel and stuff. And he has this quote. Right now, everyone's competing about talent, competing about content. So they make so many series, much more series than we need. And they're losing money sometimes. Doesn't matter. Get it. Make sure that you get the market. And now Disney's coming in as well. HBO's been bought out by AT&T, and they've already been told, you can't do what you've been doing, because what you've been doing is, yes, you've made money, but now you have to make more money. And that means you have to reduce the quality of what you do. If that doesn't just hit the nail on the head. Skarsgård basically broke down that the problem we're having with companies like Netflix, like Disney, with this staggering lack of quality is because capitalism. Specifically, there's a term for it, where this idea of exponential growth. That you constantly have to be making more money than you did before, or else you've failed. That is destroying the entertainment industry. That mentality. I mean, it's destroying the planet too, but that mentality of like we have to have more means that you pump out the most heinous garbage imaginable just for the opportunity of people watching it. Even if they don't like it, doesn't matter if they like it. What matters is they watched it. And that's the problem. That mentality is the problem behind Netflix right now. And then, as time went on, and so I was like dead set on, I'm not covering anything from Netflix anymore. Not until they've changed anything. The problem then becomes, where do I draw the line? Disney is committing these same acts as Netflix, pumping out immense amounts of content without as much quality, without any real sense of quality control. And in fact, they're far worse than Netflix. But I'll still be covering Disney content. So why don't I draw the line there? Not to mention the fact that you bring up the idea of there being no ethical consumption under capitalism. Existing within a capitalist system means that there is no form of ethical consumption. Because somebody down the line is being exploited. No matter what you consume under capitalism, the state we are in now, somebody is being exploited. some worker is being exploited or some resource is being exploited down the line of creation before it gets to you, and you cannot ethically consume under this state of capitalism. So why would I draw the line at Netflix when there are companies doing far worse? So that's my conundrum. That's what I'm debating myself. Not to mention the fact that as a reviewer, people would be if there were more people watching, they would be asking me, "Have you seen Squid Game? Have you seen Maya and the Three Whatevers, the new indigenous Mesoamerican pre-Columbian inspired movie from I think it's from the creators of Book of Life. Have you watched their movie? Have you watched the new season of Kid Cosmic? You liked it so much. There are or have you seen this terrible thing? Have you watched this thing? It's so bad. And I would be out of the loop as a reviewer on some of the things going on right now, and some of the things that people would be talking about. I wouldn't be out of the loop on the Eternals, or Spider-Man, or the new movie coming out based in Colombia. I forget its name. The new Disney movie coming out. So why is it that I draw the line at Netflix? Why does Netflix have to be the one I boycott instead of the ones that are also doing as bad? In which case, why would I review anything? Those are the questions I'm asking myself more and more. So I may or may not be covering Netflix properties on this show. I don't know yet, because I also have like 2 or 3 dozen movies that I've missed out on just because Netflix continually pumps out that much content that it's hard for me to keep up. Not to mention the fact that their website is horribly laid out and it's hard to find anything on it because they always promote the stuff. Because if you want to find a specific thing, it's hard to dig through and find it because of the way it's laid out. I feel like HBO Max and Disney Plus have done way better with the Netflix model than Netflix has, but that's just, we're talking aesthetics and user interfaces. Yeah, I'm not sure where to stand on this, because it may just have to be a thing where I cover the content and then make sure that people know that it's from a creative company, from a company that is guilty, that is, terrible. It may just have to be like that. It's like if you're covering a Ubisoft game, you should, mention to people that, hey, this is from a company that protects sexual abusers and sexual assaulters. If I'm reviewing a Disney property, then yeah, Disney is guilty of so much heinous mistreatment of their workers, and mistreatment of the mistreatment. Disney should absolutely be hit with antitrust suits and be broken down into little bitty pieces. But a lot of things that are out of my control. So we'll see where we'll see where things go in the future. You can never tell. That about does it for me for now. So have a good day, folks. We'll see y'all later.